So from now on, everybody watch what they say. Just kidding.
That'd be a miracle if I remember to watch what I said. Oh, here's Mark.
Okay.
Oh, there you are. Hi, Mark. Yeah.
All right. So, yeah. So, Alice and Makeda, maybe you can kind of, share with folks. Do you want me to share some files, or you can share them? I don't know if you can. You can access stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, it would be great if you could just pull it up, because that way I can still see people and you can't.
Okay.
But I'll start. We basically stole the format from what Mark and Kesra had done, and tried to sort of synthesize the information in the same way. I'll point out a little bit of a difference as we wait for Cello to bring it up here. We have the four different categories which existed before the workshops, and kept things in there. But one of the main things that I noticed anyway is that people had a lot of overlapping input when we were in the different categories. And so tried to kind of still sort it into those categories somehow, but that's all very subjective, as we all know. And then came up with themes, and Makeda was out most of last week, so I fully acknowledge that was where I saw our two work coming together. So all of those things in that is it called themes? I can't see it. Oh, categories. Column was my attempt at taking what Makeda had done and what I had seen and kind of lumping them together. So there's probably work needed for that, because I don't think anybody's had a chance to look at it yet. And then the next two categories, C and D, are really pulling together the raw input from the workshops into just statements that would be easily, or not easily, but at least measurable in some way, and split those into individual level and organizational level. And then that next column there, E, is what Mark had been working on in the organization one. That's just, okay, if you have all of the things that are listed in the input that we got from people, what's sort of a statement that you could make that it might not include everything that was said, but it kind of gives a good flavor. Like if you were a level 5 organization, this is something that you would be able to say about your organization, and that would show like how well it was doing. So that's kind of how I interpreted it. But as I said, Makeda was out last week, and so she hasn't even had a chance to look at this. So I know there are definitely improvements that could be made to it. And Makeda, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, I'm on mute. I think we were able to sort of look at all the inputs and come up with the main categories, which we were aligned with. So I think just organizing it and getting it to level 5 maturity, I think we are pretty much on board. Yeah, so I think the categories look good. I think the sorting of the categories looks sort of aligned with what we had discussed earlier. I think our, big question, I know both of us are very measurement focused. So we said, we'll get these big buckets in the level 5 in the categories and then work backwards to do the individual sort of measures. I don't know if that is still something that sounds like it makes sense.
It makes sense. Yeah, I think you're talking about the assessment method. That's correct, Makeda, right?
Yeah, so how do we know if we've reached this level 5 maturity? We know we want these inputs considered as part of the measure, and this is the category, but just how do we get those measures in a way that I think sort of can be easily translated to stakeholders in our organization.
So Makeda, you're kind of talking about taking the level 5 maturity examples and basically creating metrics associated with those.
Yep. And I know Allison and I had some conversations about how do we not only have metrics, but metrics that are sort of speaking the same language as the stakeholders in our organization who may not be as familiar with culture and learning and leadership, that sort of thing.
And those two columns of the summarized input, as much as possible, when we were looking at those, I think we were thinking of them in terms of how could this be measurable. And so when you look at those individual statements, there's an attempt there to say, like, you could measure this one thing in each of the statements. And so they're not like compound statements where you would have to figure out like, well, okay, to measure this, I'd have to ask like 3 questions. They should each be like 1 question. And that's an attempt to sort of start that whole process of thinking like, oh, how could you measure this? Because if you look at the very top one there under mastery, the level 5 maturity example, that's a huge compound statement that you couldn't measure that without asking like 10 different questions. So the idea in those other 2 columns was to make each of them a discrete thing that could be measured.
So let me just quickly say, Ryan, you missed the meetings when we were working this out. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And,
so I did watch the video.
Oh, okay.
You did have some videos, so
yeah.
I was watching at least one of them before this call to try to get up to speed.
I just want to kind of clarify for you and Parijat, because you were both justifiably so, dealing with the holidays, that we had 2 teams. Alice and Makeda took on the workforce stuff. They went through the 200 comments that were posted by people, sorted them out, organized them according to categories, and then there's sort of these things, these maturity examples would be something that would be like on a level 5, we would later build out 4, 3, 2, and 1. And we're also talking about how to map this to the assessment methodology. And the same thing was done also on the organization side, which Mark and Kaysra did. So I think this is really great. I think measurements are really great. But for now, we're just trying to nail this. And then as we go to the assessment method, we'll also look at that stuff that, if any of those questions from Office of Personnel Management can be used, we can, we'll just patch together something that really works for our case, just to give you a brief intro,
So,
Thanks, Charlie.
Did it go okay, Alice, on this, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Sorry,
it
Scott.
looks like, Alice, you were saying, and in reading these, that if you go down to the summarized input individual, that there are some fairly logical performance metrics that could come out of that. It's a matter of figuring out what they might be, but
Yeah, and also, there's a lot of them. So figuring out which ones we think are the key ones to ask about would also be important.
Yeah, and then the other general observation is you went through, maybe you want to talk about where you've basically put it in the organizational bucket. So this kind of slops over to, Mark's realm, and Kaysra. So
yeah, and it's because of a lot of the input we got didn't distinguish between the individual and the organization, and so split that out that way just because it made more sense to me. And I saw that in the other spreadsheet, it looked like Mark and Kaysra had done a little bit of the same thing, in that they have 2 columns where they put X's by if it has an individual component and organizational component. So I think both of us are sort of looking at how there is the overlap, and then we can decide from there if we keep it as is, if because there's different categories, or if we change it.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Any comments or questions? One of the things is that it could be the same thing that is applicable both to organization and an individual, because organization does it and an individual has to deal with it. Mm-hmm. So it's not that easy to like completely separate these 2 things,
Yep. And even our leaders are still individual employees in the organization as well. So that's another layer, right? So
yes. But to me, I think that we're really getting some clarity and consolidation here that's quite very cool. So
I really like what you did too. I haven't looked at it in detail, sorry, with the holidays and a lot of other stuff going on. Wasn't able to horn in too much, but I have a question. So I understand, we build our metrics based on these level 5 maturity examples. We were also talking about the scale of maybe 1, 3, and 5. Are we also going to look at what does 3 look like? So are we going to have statements to, if you're at level 3, what does the organization look like? And level 1 obviously is going to be a complete opposite to level 5, right?
Yes.
So is that something that,
Yeah, that would be the next step for us to build up. We wanted to try to do like all 5 things on all of the would be really difficult. So we thought we would start. I was going to start with 1 because I'm a pessimist, and Scott said, no, why don't we start with 5 and make it aspirational because he's an optimist, and and a happy human being. So I'm from Eastern Europe. I can't by definition be like have a happy outlook on life.
So Kasra, I think that there's a choice in terms of whether we try to populate these detailed kind of statements around type of statements around 1, 2, 3, 4, and 4, or whether we basically say, what we're really talking about is where do we land in terms of our progress towards a 5, so in terms of the development of the capability and the, and the process and so forth, leading there. So that's a discussion that we're going to need to have, in the assessment phase, which we get to, and there are some choices there in terms of how we do it.
Yeah, but
Nice,
this
Scott.
provides us an anchor. Having 5 provides an anchor, really.
Right.
Yep.
So then we are building up from that anchor.
I have a suggestion, Cello and
Yeah.
Scott, maybe. I like the idea on the metrics, and if you have a level 5 maturity, and for example, under this one, the first one here, it says employee-led training for coworkers, right? Well, you could determine what that means for a level 5. How many, led trainings for coworkers percentage-wise for your organization, say. And that could be your target for level 5. You could then have your level 4, 3, 2, 1, or 3, 1, however you're deciding to do that, to have different targets, Therefore, you're actually building, you're building to this level 5. And then not needing to go back and do a ton of work of describing what it means to be a 0 or a 1 or a 3, right? And because you have the 5, and you're just kind of working towards those kind of goals. And I think that will help people kind of move, rather than having different goals for different levels.
Yeah. Along those lines, Ryan, I mean, it's partly to what extent have you developed the capability and applied it, in the organization or the group that you're evaluating. And, if you have no measures, it's probably a 1, but if you have some awareness and you've created some, but not all of them, and that kind of thing. And it could be like if you had career development plans, I saw that you had that kind of landed in both organizational and individual. But if you had career development plans, to what extent, are those developed and for the employees? And you're right, you could have a metric that basically has a low level of those all the way to the higher level where you have complete, robust, career, development plans for all the employees.
Well, and on some of these things, if you have a statement, we also have an option, if we don't want to overcomplicate things, to go with an answer that ranges from strongly disagree to strongly agree.
Yeah.
So that we don't have to define, 200 times 5, 1,000 descriptions of what exactly, because it's not really that kind of surgical precision. And we're still getting a sense from people, how does it feel to them? Do I have enough opportunity for growth? Well, I agree, I don't agree, So maybe it's not realistic to expect that there's going to be like a number associated with you know what I mean, like
Yeah.
with each of these things.
So in the assessment tool, you may not need it, but I think that maybe we're agreeing that having even separate, how are we going to measure,
Yeah.
Would be a good thing to do.
Oh, yeah.
So we could wind up with some key performance indicators that, that could be applied here or suggested.
Mm-hmm. Or you could have the qualitative, like you're saying, that you could create to quantitative, right? So you could kind of move those, and then you could maybe look at it as an organization or individual, and are we progressing? Are we moving in a certain direction?
Yeah, I think that was the reason Mark had suggested, rather than have even a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is to have a 1, 3, 5, because you could be between the 1 and the 2, right? Or between the 1 and the 3, somewhere in between you're developing, or you're 3 to 5, you haven't quite mastered it, but you're past that 3, which is where we've got these metrics to say, here's how you measure 3. You say, oh yeah, we're past this measurement, but we're not quite at the mastery level.
Right.
And so, we haven't reached those KPIs.
It helps a lot too with setting organizational goals, right? As you could say, these are the ones you want to tackle this year, or, and these are the initiatives that we'll put into place in order to try to get to this next level.
Yeah.
And did we get there? So that's.
Do we want to kind of switch over to Mark and Khosrow to make sure that we get to cover the organizational?
Sure. Let me stop sharing this, and I will pull up the other one. Okay. Give me just 1 second, please. I have to open another. So let me just make sure that I can view it. Okay.
And so while you're bringing that up, I did some more work this weekend on it. I didn't get all of the level 5 maturity statements completed. And frankly, it'll be interesting because I found trust. The category of trust really difficult to write maturity statements for. Maybe it's because I was doing it last at when I was working on it, but it's a weird thing, because trust is one of those things that you know when you have it and you know when you don't. And I could say I found that one more difficult to write statements for, but and so I've got a little bit more work to do on this, which I plan to do this week. So, but what I tried to do was create a statement for a level 5 maturity that was in that category, like say, where you see read across and see shared vision, and then there's bullet points that Casper did a nice job of putting together. And so the maturity level statement I wrote typically reflects at least 1 or 2 of those in that, maybe more than that, depending on how broad ranging it was, or it's suggested by those bullet points. And so I would not presume that this is the only statement that could be made out of that category. As a matter of fact, there may be a number of other statements that demonstrate level 5 maturity could be made from those bullet points. In addition to some of the things where there's bullet points, but they don't necessarily get to the vision thing. For instance, is one of the ones we talked about last week. So these are just examples, and I look forward to other folks taking a look at them and suggesting some additional ones. So that's how I approached it, and I think the difference between workforce, when you're thinking about individuals, and then organizational culture, and there's a lot of it that I wouldn't know if I would call it. Are there lines between the two? In some cases, I don't think there are. In some areas, frankly, the one just melds into the other. There's no line there to define. In others, I think that we'll find places where we can define it from one or the other. And so I don't know if it's real important that we necessarily have to draw all those lines. I think as long as we're encompassing both workforce and organizational culture in this set of things that we've put together, I think we'll be fine. And then, as I mentioned, some things will clearly be one or the other, and there'll be other things where you go, well, this really applies to both, right?
Yeah.
So That's what I discovered as I was going through this and trying to create statements. And like I say, I found some were just came real quickly, and then others, like in the trust category, I definitely struggled a bit because I don't know, maybe other people can can suggest some good level 5 maturities for statements for trust as well.
You know, Mark, not to jump ahead too quickly here, but basically next week you're going to be having a team meeting,
Right.
And that's an opportunity to get feedback outside of this group too. So it's kind of presenting it and then, you know, getting feedback and basically identifying, you know, what actions, you know, what needs to be filled in and, you know, the actions required, you know, like you're suggesting. So it doesn't have to all be done this week.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just going to do some more work on trying to develop some more statements. And
Sure.
I welcome people putting some more to this, making edits to the ones I've already made or additions. So, because certainly these are the ones that are suggested to me as I think about how organizational practice is an organizational culture, but there certainly can be others. And so I'd love this group to take a look at the ones I've already created. I would welcome input on that.
I think one of the things I was looking at some of the ones that Alice has put together, and they would, I mean, those statements could probably fit really well with some of the stuff here.
Yeah. Well, Cello, one of the questions I had, and we also want to, you know, Jen Zukowski has joined and we'll want to, you know, kind of catch her up a little bit, but we have the categories for workforce, and then we have the categories or components for culture and organization. And how do we deal with those? Do we, because there is some commonality, but they're expressed with different words and labels. What were you thinking along those lines, Cello?
Yeah, well, the topics were defined originally by what people, you know, were concerned about, and they were really, you know, the 3 items that were identified were the organization, an employee, and the change management. What I found initially is that it seemed like the assessment methods for organizations or organizational culture were separate. It was not the same. I didn't find the same assessment methods applied to both. I found, like, you know, something for employees, like in Gallup, and then something for organizations, and, you know, OCI and Cameron and Quinn and all that. So since this is not my immediate area of expertise and the assessment methods were different, the idea to have the maturity models different made sense, because you would use them in concert. You'd define the maturity model, then you'd see where you are. And then what was illuminating was when Parijat shared this information from Office of Personnel Management, and then I dug into the literature and the references that they used, and then found that model from Rutgers, where I think was really very helpful. They also separated the organization versus, you know, workforce. So it just seemed like that was a traditional approach. As I look at it now and I see the overlap, I was sort of thinking, is it still reasonable to have separate maturity models and separate assessment methods? And I'm not sure that I can, you know, make a judgment like that readily and immediately, or say, but as I said, we got here because what I found in literature and in practice is that they were not really looked at using the same assessment. Does that make sense?
You know, Cello, I mean, it might be possible, though, depending on what the assessment method is, to consolidate them if you, for example, one framework that you just described earlier was, strongly agree, or, kind of backing down from that. So if you use that assessment methodology, you could probably apply it to both. And if, and there may be others where, because it could get rather complex for the teams if we try to separate them, maybe. I don't know.
Well, I think that this is I was just explaining how we got here.
Yeah.
We go from here. I think it's really open for discussion, and we have some folks working with us. I'm an engineer who works, on mathematical modeling and control systems. This is not my primary area of expertise. I was untrained in it. But we have Pajot, we have Makeda, we have Alice, who are all, and Kaisra, and everybody who can really, and Jen, and who can really help us make these types of decisions. So I would say that the nice part of the collaboration that we have going is that we can get input from different perspectives and then decide, do we merge this? And I don't think we should look at, I laid those out based on what I found, for the organization, and the assumption was that there would be different maturity models. If that assumption changes, I'd be okay with that, because we're still, the fact that there's so much overlap. It depends. There's a range of reactions that we could have to that. We could still have 2 maturity models and 1 or 2 assessment methods. It's really something we can decide in the next month or so.
Yeah. Maybe just for Jen's benefit, because she's in a catch-up mode here, is just making sure that she has the right link and access to these tables that were developed. A second thing is just to say that some consolidation work has gone on for both workforce and for organization. There's overlap between them, and I think the teams have, each team, kind of core group pair that has been working on this has kind of defined some of those overlap areas, but has also created some statements that kind of take a 5-level performance and try to kind of summarize what a statement of would be in the different components or categories that we have. So that's just a general sweep, but we're going to want to make sure that Jen is up to date, and that Lisa is too, and as we go forward. So Mark is involved directly here, but we're going to want to make sure that the team leads are up to date. So we want you to be able to look through that, and if you need help to get up to speed, the project team, or in this case, Alice and Makeda could help with that as well. So
I put the link to the folder in OneDrive where these spreadsheets are. So if you don't mind, you can test it and let me know. It's in the chat. You can let me know if it works for you.
Perfect. So Jen, you could actually, are you still?
Yep, I just clicked it. I was.
Is that working? Do they work?
Yeah,
the link?
The link works, and then I'm gonna just see if I can open up one of these documents. Yep, I'm good.
Can you open them up in the
application?
In the application itself, or just
let's
online?
See, I opened it on the web, editing. No, the editing options do not allow me to open it up in the application.
Do you, on the top right-hand corner, do you see your name that you're,
No, it just says sign in.
Yeah, if you click sign in, sometimes that's where it worked for me.
Yes.
Okay, I'll have to, and now it's wanting me to go through our credentials and approval.
through my agency and the 2-step process and giving my blood type and hopping on one foot. So I'll do that after this call because I find that also requires me to restart my computer and pray to the computer gods that it works. So,
Okay.
but I did click that and it looks like it wants me to log in. So I'll try that after the call. And then if there's issues, I'll circle back with fellow.
Yeah, great. Parijat, does it open up for you the link? You're on mute.
Yes, it worked, and I was able to even edit, so I can edit. So it
Okay.
works.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
So just to make sure that everybody has access to this. So I think that what you guys have done, the 4 of you, is just like really excellent. And what I was hoping is that we have like an all hands quote unquote meeting. It's only 30 minutes this Friday. And it'd be nice if we could tell others about this effort the whole meeting is 30 minutes. So just like 10 minutes a piece, just kind of what's been going on. If you guys are okay with that, I would like to put you on the agenda. If you're not okay with that, then we can wait a little bit. So, and it would be just really high level explanation of what we've been doing.
So one thought for the, I mean, Mark's, kind of already set up to do that. And if you say that there's 10 minutes and there's 5 minutes for, let's say, presentation, and then there's 5 minutes for Q&A for each of the different teams. We also have 2 other agenda items that'll be, for improvement teams and for Mike Barnett. So it's a pretty full agenda, and we want to make sure we include everything. But one thought, Jen, would be that basically Lisa, or yourself could kick it off, but then maybe, you could turn it over to,
Alice Makeda.
or Makeda to basically describe what they did, as part of the, a support team for this effort. I mean, that's just a suggestion. We can go any way. We just need to decide for Friday. For next week is a little different because we'll have the full hour to deal with basically here's what there is, and then and facilitate a discussion around feedback and suggestions and improvements and that kind of thing.
If I might suggest that since time is so limited, what would be really helpful for the following week is for people to know how to get into it and to have looked it over some before they come to the meeting. So I think if we can provide an explanation of what we were doing, it's kind of a quick how we did it, and then here's how to access it, and that would, and then please go in and poke around, look around, and see, try and look at the categories, look at things and see if they make some sense to you, and be ready to have a good discussion at your meeting, next week. So to me, that would be the most important thing, would be just to get people into it, understanding what they're looking at, and then we'll talk more next week.
Okay, so what I can do is, is take the stuff that's there now. That folder that I shared was just for this group. I can move the files as they are now into the, OneDrive folder that everybody can get into it. But I would like to preserve this workspace for just this core group clean, and so other people don't go and muck around with it just for now.
Agreed.
Because if somebody deleted these spreadsheets, it wouldn't be a happy situation. So that you guys can just, you can all just work still in that workspace, but I can put whatever we have now over there. Is that acceptable?
Sure.
Do you want to wait until Mark, you get some more statements in, or?
Yeah, can Can you move it over like, yeah, wait till maybe Thursday, Cello?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great.
It's a trade-off, how long they're gonna have to look at it, you know, and but I can wait as long as you guys want me to. I'm just.
And
I
if people have suggestions for Mark, for example, then they can just forward them to Mark. Yeah.
Sure. So I can do it anytime, whatever you guys think makes sense.
Yeah, and Jen, you may want to go through what Makeda and Alice have done, and basically, if you have comments, you could forward those on too. Alice, before you got on, Alice has done a bunch of work, but she's not saying that it's perfect or anything. So if you have additional thoughts or tweaks, then that would be useful too.
So I can't remember, I apologize for this. So Parijat and Ryan, were you in those calls when we got like 200 comments? Were you in those calls? You were, okay. Okay, so you're familiar with it. Parijat, you also were there, right? Okay.
Yep.
So anyway, I think what you guys are doing is just excellent, and my goal is to find out how I can best support you, what I can do on this end, and you know how we can go forward. Keisra?
Yeah, so this is great that planning for next week's meeting, we get this to a point where we get suggestions, but should we also have some kind of proposed plan for, so let's say next week everybody says, hey, this is great. This is great what you guys are doing. We're okay with this, but what's the next step? You know, what do we tell them? Here's what we're going to do next. Not necessarily put a timeline on it at this point, but at least the steps. Are we going to look at the level 3 first and then start developing KPIs or performance indicators, or are we going to look at the level 5, come up with the PIs, then work backwards and say level 3 PIs would be this, and then come up with, like, you know what I'm saying? Just
I understand.
What is the plan? How do we take this document once we've completed it or completed our level 5 statements? What are the next steps? Is that something we want to propose next week, or we want to wait and get the feedback first and then kind of come up with a plan?
Well, the plan that I had in mind was that we would connect the two steps, which is defining the measurements and metrics and KPIs, would be at the same time when we look at the assessment method, because assessment method would need to provide us with that. So
Right.
The next step was the assessment method, which would include defining, okay, you know, for one of these statements, what kind of question are we asking? What kind of, you know, how do we phrase it? What kind of result are we getting? And so once we have the maturity model nailed down, the assessment model nailed down with the measurements, then it's really the next step after that is, okay, analysis. You know, and we run these things. In a few organizations, we test it and we see what kind of data are we getting. We introduce it as something that can be perfected and improved, so that we would end up with a maturity model, assessment methods, and hopefully some results. Does that make sense, Keisra?
Mm-hmm.
So one thought, Keisra or Kasra, is. Yeah, I know. See, it's like que sera, Sarah, you know, is how I first got to know her. But anyway.
If people don't remember my name, I just tell them to think of Doris Day and that song. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then they won't get me.
But one thought would be that if we're successful enough on the maturity model, let's say next week, in terms of our progress, that maybe the week after, this core group could get back together to deal with assessment and begin to deal with that aspect. I mean, just throwing that out there, but I think Cello might have been thinking of that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and really, between you four guys, so far, I think this is really excellent. What's shaping up, and it was a bit of a like distilling 400 comments that were like on the fly in a chat into something that resembles the structure, and that's quite a remarkable achievement. So, so for the Friday call, it'd be nice to just kind of mention to people, but also, like Mark says, if we can send something out on Thursday or whatever, then that will prepare, because we'll have 2 1-hour sessions next week. Not just one 1-hour session. So 2 1-hour sessions. So that I think would be really useful. If it's not too much of an imposition, what would be really excellent is if this core group could actually be on both calls, because you've looked at it enough where you're really connecting the dots. The field. So. Because that would help us integrate these discussions about the workforce and the organization.
Is this for next week?
That's correct. Yeah. So, and that is, I think, Monday and Thursday. Monday and Thursday.
There will be a Wednesday change management meeting, but it's different. It's not taking these comments. Dawn, for example, may want to join, Alice, one or two of these sessions, but
I'd like to join the change management one for sure, if I can.
Yeah. See, everyone's getting excited about all 3 of them, so that's good.
Can I backtrack just a little bit? I think that before we look at the assessment, we do need to look at the workforce and the change management and start looking at the overlaps and try to figure out what do we want to, kind of keep in both, or before we start the assessment, right?
It kind of relates to the assessment, though, in a sense. I mean, it's all connected, but yeah, we do need to do that.
I think it would make more sense to kind of do that, because when you're looking at the assessment models, and you're going to say, well, just let's move this over to organizational, and the assessment's going to be a little bit different when you're thinking of it from an organization perspective, than from an individual perspective. So I don't know. I mean, it could work both ways, but just a thought.
Well, yeah, we thought that we would, since change management is a process, that we could leverage the the maturity models that have been defined for process capabilities and maturity. And when I looked through some of the change management methodology, there's a real recognition, like in ADKAR and stuff like that, about the importance of the buy-in and the people and the organization and all that. So it all does connect, all these 3 things connect, but the fact that we address them separately initially, I don't think is going to be a hindrance. I think it will help us in integrating them later. Makeda, do you have, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, but Khosrow's point, is let's at least figure out, so we have these 3, how are they going to relate? Is kind of what you're saying, where are the overlaps? Do we deal with it, with organization and workforce as one big thing, or do we deal with them separately, or the combination, which is kind of where we have been, and figure that out, and not, that's an important thing that this group can, kind of give some thought to.
And what I would propose is it would probably be better. We saw some good examples from DC Water. I think that to maybe resist the temptation to reinvent everything,
right,
and to stick with the stuff that's already out there, even if it's not perfect, and we might, but there's standard, there's standard methodologies for change management. If we can, from the Association for Change Management, from different proprietary methods like ProSci, that we can avoid getting spread so thin and so wide that it becomes difficult to have, tangible results fairly soon. Michaela, you're on mute, and I'm dying to hear. You always have good things to say. So before we stray too far off the path, I want to hear from you.
No, I just think it's such an interesting philosophical conversation of, what is the overlap between workforce and organization? Where does the individual end? Where does the organization begin? That's like a happy hour conversation that you have 3 or 4 glasses of wine and you're like, what is the individual? What is the organization? So I think if we do decide to keep them separate, we'll really have to get clear definitions, working definitions, and sort of rationales for why we have identified those working definitions.
Yes, I'm searching for something. I'm searching for something I want to share that was really useful. Give me just 1 second. So Scott, if you can keep the conversation going. I can't do 2 things at the same time.
Makeda, I think that, there is this thing of what's an organization-wide direction and vision and all of that you do. And then it does get down to the employee and that engagement. So I think what Cello's going to pull up, I'm just trying to read his mind, but I've seen some stuff that has that basically deal with it, is that me, and then I think somebody used the leader, and then you have the organization, and so you have different levels of engagement. If you were to combine things, if you separate them, you almost have to have different statements for what an organization direction kind of statement would be, and then and just take career paths. I mean, you develop the organization-wide capability and system, so to speak, and then you would apply it at the individual level, and you would have these career development plans at the individual level too. So it's a philosophical happy hour question, and this is our happy hour. So
we have a survey that our communication sends out every year, and it's a pretty cool survey. But the first year I took the survey, I was really confused because I didn't know if they were asking me these questions based on how I feel the organization is doing, or whether how I feel the actual public affairs group is doing, right? That group in itself versus the whole organization. And then I'm told, well, no, the group is the whole organization. Well, yeah, so am I a part of the whole organization. Yeah. But to answer those questions was really hard. It was difficult for me because I could not discern whether they were asking me about the people in the public affairs office that were putting the survey out, or whether they were asking for GLWA as a whole, So that's where I think this clarity between the workforce and organization needs to come in. When you overlap it, then you don't know if you combine them all at once. Well, are you asking me as an organization, or are you asking me as a group of people? So,
actually,
but to Makeda's point, there has to be that to define what that is, so people understand.
Because there is the organization, there's the group, there's the supervisor, and there's the employee, right?
Right.
And there's the union too.
I've done those surveys before. I've done those surveys before too. I know exactly what you're talking about, and that's one of those things when you're designing them, you have to be very careful, because a lot of times, because I've been in leadership positions, they'll start asking me questions. It's like, well, do you want me to do this as I think the organization is, or do I think it is, or as right? I mean, there's those lenses that there's how I perceive myself to be, there's how I perceive my group to be, there's how I perceive the organization to be.
Right.
And so that's going to be an important part of it. You're absolutely right. That's going to be an important part of our design is how we formulate those questions to make sure, and we may have a question that asks, the same question, but how do you experience it as an individual, as a part of a group, as part of a larger organization? And so, yeah, it'll be very legitimate, and it may be the same area, and then one will be obviously workforce, and then one would be org culture.
And I know when we've done these surveys in the past, we've noticed a really big difference between people's employees' relationships to their unions and to the larger organization. So they had really high trust with their unions and zero trust with us, So they're like, how do I answer that? Because that's still part of their work experience.
Right, exactly. You got to be really specific on those questions.
So this is the model that I was talking about. The left side, unfortunately, the way the pages flip is not the best. But this is the left side, which is really the organization, the HR system, the role, the management, leadership. But if it continues to the right, I'll go to the employee engagement. So this was the organizational side, this was the employee side. So this was sort of personal traits, and then it's psychological conditions on engagement. This is the actual engagement. And then it's behavior, strategy, and financial performance and stuff like that. So this is again something that was a reference for that report on Office of Personnel Management that Parijat pointed out to me. And being an engineer, this really kind of spoke to me because it really highlighted the relationship between the two things and what happens on one side, what happens on the other side, So you got organizational design and governance and staffing and rewards and training, all the things, leadership development, work life, all the things that are out of control that an employee cannot control, and then management and leadership. And then on the other side are things that employee experiences. This is like personal things, and this is, whether it's meaningful, psychological safety and all that. So it's not terribly different from the framework that we have right now. We just didn't use exactly all these categories, but we used, the stuff from Lencioni and Daniel Pink. It's also a question of how complicated we make this, how simple we make it, and stuff like that. And we can discuss this as a group. So that's sort of where we are, and we're sort of towards the end of our allotted time.
And Cello, can I make a clarification? The reason I thought it was okay to wait to share it later this week because I didn't want people to necessarily review it and have discussion on it on Friday, but to review it and be ready to discuss next week.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We have no time. Oh, I totally agree with that.
Yeah, okay, good.
To go through this in 10 minutes, no. We're dealing with human beings here, and not robots or something, yeah. We can.
But I still think it's a good idea to get them the link maybe even before Friday's meeting, because there's not much time between Friday's meeting and Monday's workforce meeting when we do expect them to be familiar with it. So just balance that a little bit.
Sure. Yeah.
Frank, you can upload it. You can upload it anytime, really, and then we can maybe just provide updates as there's updates going. You want to put it up today? I have no objection to it. It'll just be more complete by the end of the week.
Sure. And yeah, so maybe we can find some best compromise, and sort of posting it today probably it doesn't make sense. People just came from vacation. They're just like deluged with emails and stuff. Maybe Thursday is a little, so maybe if, I post something on Wednesday, with whatever the updates are, and then I can do it Thursday as well. I mean, I'm.
Okay, no big deal. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, Mark, let me know if there's anything you want me to do.
I will. Thank you.
And Jen, if you want to, if you have time, or Lisa has time, both of you, just going through and saying this makes sense to me, and and really just give feedback to Alice and Makeda, on that too, so that we're all on the same page. You could copy Cello and myself, but we just want to be on the same page.
Or if there's certain statements or certain areas, you can put a comment right in the spreadsheet.
Yeah, that's right.
You don't have to send a separate email. It'd be a lot easier.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Please do.
That's true. And you could even use the link in the meantime, if you wanted to, right?
So I just want to quickly ask Jennifer and Ryan and Parijat, would you like to, we have two groups now. Alice and Makeda are dealing with the workforce issues, and Mark and Kaisra are dealing with the organization. Which group would you like to join? Which would you, what would you like to do? Where would you like, how would you like to participate?
I'll review the link that you sent and those different documents, and I'll let you know, Cello. I'll send you a note.
Okay, Parijat?
I will review them, but I would be more interested in organizational culture.
Okay, so that's Mark and Kaisra. And Jen, I would guess workforce?
Yes, workforce.
Okay, so that's Alice and Makeda. So if Alice and Makeda, if you're going to be organizing something, if you don't mind including Jennifer, and then for Mark and Kaisra, will if you could include Parijat, and then Ryan is he's not committed yet.
I can commit, Cello. Ready? I'm ready.
Okay, Ryan is
That
ready.
was quick.
Ryan's
I'm
ready.
ready to commit. Okay. I'm gonna do workforce. I'll
Okay.
work with workforce. So Alice, Makeda.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so that sounds good. And any other comments or thoughts before we close?
Nope.
I have one question. Are you guys having fun?
I am.
Yeah.
Good. Well, that's very important.
Yeah, on our little survey, when we did the team meetings, fun scored lower than the rest. It was a 3.5. And so if there's any suggestions to increase the fun with the teams, you need to step up and make suggestions. So.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And again, you guys worked, Alice and Makeda and Mark and Kaisra worked through the holidays. This is way beyond the call of duty and very much appreciated. And you guys are really doing a wonderful job.
So just to make it fun, we'll end with a question from Jeopardy. Despite its size, China uses only this many time zones.
Ah.
What is one?
All right, yeah. So I'll bring a Jeopardy question every meeting.
That's a great idea. That's a great
idea. We have bingo cards for online meetings at my organization, so I could bring some bingo cards.
That sounds good. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. And let me just stop the recording.